Hello, my name is Grebe. I'm a researcher from Professor Anne Dörte-Lattek's Intellectual Disability Nursing Research Group at Bielefeld University of Applied Sciences in Germany. This presentation is about a training program that we developed to qualify people with intellectual disabilities to act as co-researchers in research projects. Participation and inclusion in intellectual disability research have come a long way. Historically, intellectual disability research treated people with ID mainly as a research subject. So it was primarily research on people with ID. People with ID were observed or caregivers were used as proxies for them. Since the 1970s, it was more and more criticized that people with ID had hardly any share nor access to knowledge production in their very own subject area, leading to the well-known slogan, "Nothing about us without us." Since 2.5 decades, it is broad consensus under intellectual disability researchers that research in this field should always be emancipatory. Today, we often see researchers give voice to people with ID in some steps of the research process, for example, a shared development of the research topic or of sometimes all research questions, and that research results are validated with the target group. But what we call inclusive research means more. As described by Wormsley and Johnson, it means to involve people with their ideas, their views, and their values in all steps of the research process. That means as initiators, or instigators as Wormsley calls it, as interviewers, as we have chosen a qualitative research design, as analysts of the data, and ideally, finally, also as authors, as disseminators, and also as the users of this research. The context of our approach is the research project with the German abbreviation MGMB, which literally stands for Medication Management and Preventive Healthcare for Adults with Intellectual Disability. In this project, we developed and implemented an advanced practice nursing approach with home visits to people with ID. We have a presentation on this intervention on this conference in a parallel session. One component to evaluate this approach, besides an RCT and qualitative stakeholder interviews, is an inclusive research approach. Therefore, we built up a team of 6 co-researchers with intellectual disability, and we developed and implemented a training program for them that I'll introduce to you in the following. The training program consists of 4 steps. The first is the recruiting of the co-researchers and building up a relationship with them and amongst each other. When we recruited the co-researchers, we already paid attention to a relatively homogeneous level of communication skills. So the first 2 steps overlapped to some amount. In the third phase, the co-researchers work on the choice of their research topics and the formulation of research questions that are relevant to their life world and social environment. The training comprises exercises carried out with an open, flexible approach, which takes into account the individual biographies, knowledge, skills, and interests of each of the researchers and the team as a whole. We implemented weekly team meetings over a period of approximately 7 months. One of our professional researchers with an educational and linguistic qualification and experience in working with people with ID supports the process and promotes activation of knowledge and experiences. As I already mentioned, we paid some attention to the communication skills already when recruiting the co-researchers. After the group had constituted, we used 2 meetings for a more detailed analysis. As the basis, we used the common European framework of reference for languages. And the purpose of this analysis of communication skills was to ensure that our moderator is aware of the language level, skills, and limitations of each individual. In our case, we had relatively high levels of communication skills, but for example, one researcher used an assistive device. Based on the analysis, our moderator was able to take into account and integrate the communication skills of each individual and develop communication strategies for the entire group. Our superior topic, of course, was health, but our objective is to let the co-researchers choose the specific topic within this framework. We used 4 to 5 meetings with teaching and discussing several health problems that came to question by the co-researchers based on their experiences and life world. We produced photos and videos in advance to address the health problems mentioned by the co-researchers and to support the teaching and discussing. On the bottom of this slide, you can see some examples for lower back pain, physical disability, headache, and vaccination. In the exercises step of our program, the teaching of basic research and interviewing skills took the longest time. We spent approximately 6 months for qualifying the co-researchers to conduct qualitative interviews based on the interview guideline they also developed themselves. We had 2 months, 8 to 9 meetings with teaching and discussing tasks, fields, and methods of research, and 4 additional months of teaching and training on communication techniques, on how to generate new questions, on interaction during a conversation, on paraphrasing of not understood questions, on sensitization of the interview partners, on perception of feelings in the course of the conversation, and technically on the use of a voice recorder. Here on the bottom of the slide, we see some photos of the 6 co-researchers visiting us in our lab at Bielefeld University of Applied Sciences, where they presented their research questions and the interview guide to the core research team. So up to now, we qualified the co-research group to select a research topic, to develop an interview guide, and to conduct qualitative interviews. These interviews were scheduled for early 2020, but could not yet be realized because of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. The implementation of this phase will hopefully be this autumn, and this phase will then be followed by the phase of the data analysis. We intend to continue to work with this group for further research projects to use the build-up competencies of the group, and we look forward to all the positive surprises still to come. Thank you very much for your attention.